10 Shadows, the immensely powerful technique inherited by Megami Fushiguro. The potential for this technique is nearly limitless, rivaling that of Gojo himself. So why not give it to Mr. Corkless himself, Izuku Midoriya? Before we begin, make sure to comment your what if suggestions down in the comments section below. I want to see a ton of suggestions and comments, as I'm going to be replying to as many as I can. And maybe even while you're down there, you can go ahead and like and hype the video as well. It helps the channel out immensely. And without a further ado, enjoy. We start the story off with Izuku and his classmates watching Bakugo awaken his quirk. Izuku looks amazed, watching as the sparks fly, crackle, and pops, expanding off of the small, tiny explosions of the 4-year-old Bakugo Katsuki. This leaves Izuku extremely excited. He can't wait to discover what his quirk will be. Jumping up and down excitedly, he runs over to Bakugo, giving him a high five, knowing that in a few short hours, he was going to find out exactly what his quirk was. However, with that thought, almost instantly, a voice comes over the loud intercom speaker system, asking if Izuku Midoriya could come to the main office. Izuku Midoriya to the main office. Izuku Midoriya to the main office. It repeats as Izuku looks up, smiling. His crazed look goes over, glazing over his classmates. I can't wait, he says, his voice echoing around the room. The teacher gives him a subtle smile before patting him on the back of his backpack before he opens the door and rushes off to the main office. In a few short hours, his quirk was going to be found out, and he was going to become an amazing hero. He just couldn't wait. Walking to the front, he finds his mother standing there waiting for him as he yells out, "Mom!" running up to her excitedly, jumping into her arms. And from there, she puts Izuku down, grabbing hold of his hand and guiding him into the parking lot, opening up the sliding minivan door and buckling him into his child's seat. Upon being buckled up, Izuku grabs hold of his All Might action figure and starts swooshing it in the air. He is so excited. There comes a time in every boy's life where they get to find out what their quirk is and how they're going to become a hero, and Izuku was no different. For every 4-year-old in this world, that time, the time where they find out their quirk, what it is, that is the happiest moment of their life. And Izuku was about to be that boy, about to be the happiest boy in the entire world. So as Inko hops into the driver's seat and starts the car, and the minivan's engine hums, speeding off. We see Inko parking her car in the parking lot to the quirk doctor's office. She swiftly unbuckles Izuku, picking him up, taking him inside the building. Izuku racing around, flying, swooshing that All Might action figure in the air, pretending that it is flying. He looks back towards his mother, a smile written all over his face. Oh, he couldn't wait. He jumps up and down, pulling at his mom's dress before she would tell him, "Izuku, calm down, honey. Well, we're just gonna have to wait," right as she walks up to the receptionist table. She tells her that they have an appointment under the name Midoriya before the receptionist smiles, saying that if they can just take a seat and the doctor will be right with you. Looking down to the young Izuku, the receptionist sees him playing with his action figure. She gives him a wink and whispers to him, "Good luck," before the two of them would go and sit down, waiting a few short minutes for the quirk doctor to appear. And lo and behold, he would walk through 2 swinging doors, looking down towards his clipboard. He would look down, saying out, Izuku Midoriya," he would say, seeing Inko and Izuku stand up as he would smile, ushering them into a back room. He would then shut the door and begin performing a few tests on Izuku, placing a light up to his eyes, seeing if his pupils will dilate, looking into his ears, making sure there's no earwax, as well as tapping a device right onto his knees to test his reflexes. Finally, though, he would tell Izuku that it is time for the X-ray. the fabled foot x-ray. He tells Izuku to place on a giant metal jacket to prepare Izuku and prepare his body so that the x-rays don't give him any excess radiation. So putting it on, the quirk doctor would then take a snapshot of Izuku's foot with the x-ray machine. It would begin developing right in front of their eyes before the doctor would pick up the printed out x-ray and shuffle off into the back office where him and a few others would take a look over it and review the scene. So after reviewing it for a couple of minutes, we would cut to see Izuku jumping up and down, his hands balled into fists. He's an entire ball of energy. He looks over to his mother with a giant smile outstretched across his face. Mom, what do you think my quirk's gonna be? He says, looking to her with a great big smile. How strong do you think I am, Mom? He's gonna say, holding up his hand, hitting a hero pose, holding that All Might action figure up in the air. However, the doctor would walk in, cutting the moment short, a grimace on his face. Holding the x-ray scans in his hand, he hands them over to Inko. Well, Miss Midoriya, you see, pointing down with 2 fingers down to where the toe joint should be, he would whisper into her ear. He's quirkless. He has no extra toe joint, ma'am. Her smile, Inko's smile, fades, looking back over to Izuku, her head shaking, unsure if she can manage to look over at her child. But she does. Izuku, seeing the worry in his mother's eyes, seeing that something wasn't right, he would look over to her, asking her, Mom? He would say, stuttering, understanding. Even though he's only 4 years old, he understands something is wrong. He stops jumping and asks her, What's wrong, Mom? Izuku, honey, she says, I don't know how to tell you this, but you weren't born with a quirk, sweetie. His smile drops instantly. What? He says under his breath, stuttering out the words, barely managing to get them out of his mouth, dropping his All Might action figure to the floor. It slams to the ground with a thud. One of the shiny yellow tendrils of hair breaking off from the fall. Tears begin welling up in Izuku's eyes. I can't be quirkless. I can't, he says, his words shaky, lips quivering. I'm so sorry, Izuku, Inko says, tears now streaming out of her own eyes. I can still be a hero. Right, Mom? Right? He says, a nervous smile outstretched across his lips, hoping and pleading with her and the universe that it is still possible, still in his cards, to become a hero. As Izuku asks his mother this, she can't say anything in return, shaking her head, tears falling, streaming down her face. Continuing to cry, Izuku is then picked up by his mother and rushed out of the office. She doesn't know what more to do. The receptionist would watch all of this unfold, looking over towards the crying Izuku, looking over to him with a sad look on her face, watching with a sad frown, shaking her head slowly. Yet another quirkless child's world falling apart all around them. This was the worst part of the job for her. She got to see some of the happiest children in the world, finding out what their special, innate ability was, what their superpower was. But then there was the normal kids. The kids born without that fabled superpower. The kids born destined to work in an office building, slaving away for a boss that doesn't respect them, all because they didn't have an extra toe joint. The world was cruel, and she was witnessing yet another casualty to it. As Inko would step out of the doctor's office, she would place Izuku into the car, buckling his seatbelt, getting back in the driving seat, and driving off. The two of them would arrive home with Izuku running up the steps, slamming his feet against them, tears streaming, fully running down his face. As he was having a meltdown, he races into his bedroom, opening the door before slamming it behind him. Action figures and toys fall from Izuku's shelves, falling down to the ground, but Izuku could care less. He slumps into his bed, crying into his pillow. Tears streaming into his pillow, soaking it wet, as Inko would walk into the room, sitting down on the side of his bed. She places a soft hand on Izuku's back, rubbing it, telling him that it's going to be okay, but he quickly swipes it off. No, it's not going to be okay, Izuku says. I don't have a quirk. I can't be a hero, he says, tears streaming down his face even further. He doesn't know what to think, what to do. And Inko wouldn't know what to say either. She would stand up, telling Izuku, "I'm sorry," with a few more tears falling from her face as well, walking out of Izuku's door, leaving him in his room alone, and eventually he would cry himself to sleep. Waking up as the sun would peer through Izuku's blinds, landing on his eyes, he would flutter them open, looking around, confused, dazed almost, what was going on, realizing that the day had passed, realizing he had slept through the night. He'd look around, sitting up from his bed. Finally, his eyes would land on his desk. His mother had left him dinner there from last night, and it sat cold and untouched. A reminder serving as one of the horrors that had unfolded with the day before. Izuku having just wanted to let all of these things go, wanting to forget the world that had happened before he had been announced quirkless. Opening his door, he falls down, slamming his feet into each and every step with a thud, walking down the steps where he would find his mother waiting for him. She would try to give him a shaky smile, but even she couldn't manage it, holding out Izuku's green backpack and his red shoes in her hand. Walking over to him, she bends down on one knee, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's gonna be okay, Izuku. It's gonna be okay," she reassures him, tying his shoes and putting his backpack on, as the almost lifeless, cold, and quiet Izuku walks with her, walking into her car, where she would then begin driving off to his school. As he arrives, he would walk into his classroom, as all of his classmates would eagerly rush over to him. They'd yell, asking Izuku, "What's your quirk? What's your quirk?" They couldn't wait. They were all excited. Every day was like Christmas for them, finding out each and every one of their friends' quirks, their superpowers. But Izuku had nothing to say. He would look towards them, shaking his head, muttering out the words, "Quirkless." His classmates would give him a confused look, not hearing him, before he would finally yell it out. "I'm quirkless, okay?" he would say, tears beginning to stream down his face once more. I'm quirkless," he would mutter once again, looking around, seeing the shocked looks across all of his classmates' faces. Many of them didn't know what to think. They were only 4, but at the same time, they had known if you were different, that was enough to be an outcast. And there it was, plain as day, a crowd outstretched, staring at Izuku as if he was different, all looking at him, not accepting him into the group. He would take a step forward, reaching out his hand, reaching out towards his best friend, Katsuki Bakugo. However, Bakugo would look towards him with almost a disgusted look on his face, turning his back to Izuku, walking away. His best friend now leaving him in the past, just like Izuku's hopes and dreams of becoming a hero. And because of this, for the rest of the day, Izuku is quiet. He doesn't speak or talk to anybody. Even when the teacher calls on him asking him for his answer, he doesn't give one. He's a shell. He's numb to the world around him. So when the final bell chimes, he is relieved, just wanting to go home and cry himself to sleep all over again. However, walking out to the pickup line, trying to find his mother's minivan, strangely, he can't seem to find it anywhere. Looking around, he finally asks a teacher, but they haven't seen her either. The school deciding to call Inko after a couple of minutes, causing her to shake awake. The night prior, she had spent it crying, pitying Izuku, seeing the world as no place for someone quirkless. She looks over, seeing the time on her alarm clock, jumping out of bed, pulling the covers off of her. Oh my gosh, she says, the phone still held up to her ear. I'll be right there. I'm so very sorry, she would say, stuttering out the words, jumping out of her bedroom, racing down the steps, putting her shoes on, and running to her car, rushing to pick Izuku up from school. Upon arriving back at the school, she profusely apologizes to not only Izuku, but also his teachers for being late. She didn't want the teachers to see her as a mess. Even they had to have known Izuku was now quirkless, and it was plain as day, very obvious that it was getting to her, as anyone would. So she would pick Izuku up, buckling him into the car seat as they would then speed back off. And of course, to make it up to him, Inko would look back in her rearview mirror, seeing Izuku's cold eyes. She would try to lighten the mood, telling him that she'll make him whatever he wants for dinner. Whatever I want? Izuku asks interrogantly, asking her, wondering if it was really true. And of course, Inko would say, yep, whatever you want, giving him a little nod in the mirror. Izuku would smile a little bit, saying, yay! I can't wait. So can you make my favorite? He would say, exclaiming excitedly, as Inko would nod her head, pulling the car up, parking it in front of the house. However, as the two would get out, something didn't look right. Inko would walk up to the door, trying to put her key in, but right as she goes to touch the door, it would slide open, creaking as it does. Inko, confused, looks back towards Izuku. I must have left the house unlocked when I went to get you. Silly me, she would say, trying to reassure herself, but strangely, she walks into the dark room, turning the lights on, finding the house trashed. Glass is shattered everywhere across the kitchen and living room. All of the drawers and cabinets are thrown open. Inko and Izuku take a couple of nervous steps back, looking around the house, shocked at what was going on. Izuku, get... Before Inko can finish her sentence, a masked man jumps out from around a dark corner, grabbing hold of Inko's lips, holding her against her will, wrapping his arm around her neck, pointing a gun to her head. He would look towards Izuku, holding Inko hostage, before realizing he's only a small child, a 4-year-old. He would give out a slight laugh, looking down towards the boy. What was I thinking? You're just a kid, he would say, laughing towards Izuku, forcing Inko upstairs. Izuku, cowardly, scared, hides in a dark corner of the home, crying, hearing a loud bang come from upstairs after a few short minutes. Hearing this again, hearing heavy footsteps collide with the steps, he covers his eyes, shakily covering and quivering as he does so. However, something changes. His body begins moving on its own, creating a shadow puppet with his hands, summoning the 2 divine dogs, one black and one white. They begin to growl towards the intruder, growling at him, their eyes locked on in anger, peering towards the man, bloodlust seeping through their gaze. He would look towards them, pointing his gun at them. "Kid, take your quirk away. What do you think you're doing?" he would say out, fear trickling through his words. However, Izuku would continue to hide his eyes, thinking that if he just keeps them shut, he doesn't have to face with the reality in front of him. And lo and behold, this, in a way, would be true. The dogs would lunge towards the man, biting him viciously as he begins to scream, yelling out in pain as the dogs rip apart his flesh, ripping at the seams, almost pulling and tearing at the body. He falls down to the floor with a thud, slumping down unconscious as his blood begins to trickle out of him. Izuku watching in shock as the dogs come running back to him, sitting down, licking his face. But Izuku is still scared, holding the dogs up for his protection, holding them, hugging them, so that he felt safe. But he still didn't want to move. A couple of hours later, we cut to see Izuku still sitting in this dark corner, scared to move, when all of a sudden he hears a knock on the door. "Inko?" she would say, the door wide open as a woman's voice rings out. "Inko, are you okay? I noticed your door was open," she would say, peering through, finding the bloody massacre out in front in the living room and kitchen. She would scream as the dogs would begin growling right at her. "Oh my gosh!" she yells, the horror scene terrifying her as she runs back out of the door, calling the cops as she does so. However, before the cops could even arrive, a man appears in the doorway, right as Izuku begins to tiredly blink back and forth, fighting his sleep. He appears in the doorway, and Izuku blinks. The man is gone. He blinks again, and now the man is carrying him outside of the city. Blinking again, Izuku fully passes out, closing his eyes one final time. Hours pass as Izuku would wake up to the sound of a teapot whistling. He's awake instantly, getting defensive, but the old man doesn't seem to mind, simply telling Izuku to calm down, putting a reassuring hand up. It's okay, Izuku. Trust me." Confused, Izuku asks the man who he is and what is going on, but the man just gives out a soft chuckle. "You don't need to worry about any of that anymore, kid." The man tells Izuku bluntly that, unfortunately, his mother was killed, and now he is here at his house. However, this doesn't seem to answer Izuku's question. Again, he asks him why he had saved him, who he is, but the man laughs again. "Look, Izuku, I saved you so that I could train you, of course. You happened to inherit a very, and I mean very, powerful ability known as the 10 Shadows, Izuku. With it, you could become a very powerful hero, with training, of course." So from there, Izuku and the man would set off training Izuku to use the 10 Shadows. This almost enlightened Izuku. Although his mother had just died, his dream, his entire life wanting to become a hero, wasn't over just yet. And so he was mourning the loss of his mother. There was something to shield that pain from him, for Izuku to hide away in. And that was becoming a hero, training with this old man. And so they would set out to do so, training Izuku's body and mind so that he would be strong enough to even summon a Shikigami. And this was because Izuku was only 4 years old. I mean, what 4-year-old would be strong enough to summon one and submit it, taking control of them? Certainly not Izuku, especially after the traumatizing event that had just played out before him. And so, with Izuku deemed not strong enough physically or mentally, they set off to train his body and his mind. Years passing, with Izuku now turning 10 years old. They had been training him for 6 years, pretty much. Izuku now muscular, his body toned. I mean, dude's still a child, barely even out of elementary school, and he is incredibly strong and capable. And so this would lead the old man to finally allow Izuku to summon a Shikigami, to try and fight it and submit it, to capture it and take hold of it in the 10 Shadows technique. And of course, Izuku's first Shikigami he was going to summon was Nue, the winged Shikigami that was almost owl-like in appearance. The bird-like creature Izuku would summon, creating some sort of circle, as he would then summon the bird. It would fly down, shooting out its electricity from its wings, flying down towards Izuku. However, Izuku wouldn't mind, summoning his divine dogs to begin fighting it. The dogs would bite viciously towards Nue's wings. However, they would begin to electrocute both of the dogs. They would yelp out in pain, retracting their fangs, jumping back towards Izuku, growling towards the bird, growling towards it with bloodlust, trying to keep it away from Izuku. However, as it would go in for one final foul swoop, both of the dogs would lunge towards it, grabbing hold of its head, causing it to submit, kneeling down, giving Izuku full control of its abilities and its use, allowing Izuku to summon it. With that, the man would smile, smiling towards Izuku, giving him a high five, telling him that that was amazing. His path to becoming an unstoppable hero had just begun. Izuku would go on to continue his training, here and there attempting to summon different Shikigami and failing, summoning a max elephant and great serpent, both times failing because he simply wasn't powerful enough. I mean, he's barely 10 years old trying to fight these giant curses. It wasn't going to play out in Izuku's favor. Of course, he somehow, someway managed to beat Rabbit Escape using Divine Dogs and Nue, simply just because the dogs were able to hunt down the rabbits and they would submit to him. So with that, we would see Izuku and his 3 curses of the 10 Shadows continuing to train. Izuku training, using each of their abilities, hoping that he was going to be enough to make it into UA. However, we would see even more years pass, 4 to be exact, with Izuku and the man continuing to train. Along the way, Izuku managing to get Toad and the Great Serpent, now having a grand total of 5 of the shadows of the 10 Shadows. However, something was off. The man that had been training Izuku for years never revealed his identity, never showing his face to Izuku. Or not showing his face, never revealing his identity. And because of this, Izuku always wondered who he was. And now we cut to see the man on his deathbed. He was an old man when he found Izuku, and now 10 years passing, it was enough time for the old man to get sick and begin slowly deteriorating. So Izuku knelt beside the old man's bed, hoping that he would make a recovery. He would place a soft hand on Izuku's fist. "It'll be okay, Izuku," he says with a shaky, old, raspy voice down towards him. "It was meant to be. My destiny was to lift you up, to train you, to mold you into that perfect hero I knew you could be. And you're becoming that every single day. That was my destiny, Izuku. And your destiny is to become an amazing hero. So don't let that go to vain. Don't let my destiny go to vain. Fulfill your destiny." he would say towards Izuku, as Izuku would nod his head, a few stray tears falling out of his eyes as the man would smile down towards him. It'll be okay. Trust me. I managed to somehow time this. Tomorrow, you'll be able to go off towards UA, and hopefully they'll have dorms there for you. Good luck, my son, he would say, holding out his hand, caressing Izuku's cheek, as the man's identity would now have been revealed. Although he wasn't there to save his wife, Izuku's mother, Inko, he was there to train Izuku, to lift him up, to mold him into a king. And now, as he sits, taking his last breaths, his very own son, the one he had been training for years, sits knelt down in front of him, tears streaming down his face, crying, saying, no, you can't go like this. He would say, but it was no use, the man taking his final breath and submitting to his illness. With that, Izuku would now bury him off in the woods behind his house, placing a small wooden sign there that didn't have a name, just said Dad. And the day would slowly roll by, trickling past, as it was now time for the UA entrance exam. Izuku would wake up saddened by his father's death, but still eager to fulfill his destiny to become a hero. And so he would walk in to the UA campus with a smile on his face, wearing what his father had given him, saying that it was the perfect uniform for him. It was pretty much the same sort of jumpsuit kind of esque outfit that Megami and many Jujutsu sorcerers wear. And so with Izuku donning it, he would walk in to the UA facilities, sitting down in a dark auditorium. Present Mike sitting at the head of it, yelling out, using that present Mike quirk, expelling his words across the entire auditorium, telling them all exactly what was going to happen and how it was going to play out, before handing them all the written portion of the entrance exam. Izuku would smile looking towards it before his pen would begin writing in his answers. While he had been training his body and his mind mentally, he wasn't really training his smarts, his intelligence, and because of that, he would falter just a little bit. Sure, here and there, they would practice teaching Izuku fundamental things, but a large majority of their training was on training up the 10 shadows and Izuku's cursed energy. And so he was extremely average at best when it comes to intellect, writing down all of his answers and submitting it to Present Mike right as the time expires. So from there, Izuku would then be handed a card telling him which hero group he was going to be in. Seeing that he was the first group, he would smile. He always did better as the first group, just getting it right done out of the way. And so with a smile on his face, he would walk in to where he was said to go, standing around looking at all of his future classmates and his current opponents, smiling, creating hand signals as a shadow would appear behind him. Nue racing out of his shadow, extending out as Izuku would hop on his back. Right as the doors begin to open, he would flying through the doors, the bird creature shooting off its electricity, ramming its hard wings right into each of the robots. Izuku smiling as the electricity coming off of Nue's wings would electrocute the robots, causing them to slump to the ground, completely short-circuited. From there, he would summon Great Serpent, the giant snake, to quickly attack all of the robots surrounding him, even biting, using its giant fangs to bite through the metal of the robots. Easily, within a short 5-minute time span, Izuku had managed to rack up over 120 points with ease. And seeing the robot graveyard surrounding him, he would smile, looking around, seeing that no one else had managed to replicate his success. And because of that, he would place his hands behind his head, strolling around the city, basically just looking around, playing it safe, not wanting to do anything else. However, this was until the giant zero-pointer robot would appear. It would begin shaking the city, its giant steps slamming down into the ground, shaking the earth beneath him. Izuku would look around, wondering what was going on and how this was happening, before he would look up, his gaze straightening, focusing in on the massive robot, skyscrapers tall, standing now in front of him. Izuku, with a shaky look, would stare up, knowing that he wasn't going to be able to do anything about it. However, right as he would go to turn, he would hear a girl yell out for help. Ochako Uraraka. Her leg was stuck under a giant boulder, and the zero-pointer was coming right for her. Without even thinking, Izuku's legs would move on their own, racing towards Uraraka, racing to save her, as he would begin rushing off to her, creating a hand sign as his shadow extends. Hundreds of rabbits swarming out of the shadow would begin racing around the city, almost like a wave of rabbits swooping down, giving Izuku a distraction. All the movement around would confuse the zero-pointer, causing it to stop moving, giving Izuku time to race in, lifting up the boulder off Uraraka's leg, and would pick her up, running off, running back to safety where the other UA participants were. And with that, the entrance exam would come to an end, the horn sounding as Nezu would come over the intercom. Thank you for participating in the UA entrance exam. Unfortunately, the UA entrance exam has now come to a close, so please exit where you entered and make your way to the waiting room. With that, all of them would make their way over to the auditorium that they were once in, a giant timer outstretched across the screen. This was yet another UA test. A timer reading 12 hours would be listed on the board. This timer was how long it would take Cementos to build up a dorm building for each of the new first years. For some reason, they hadn't built any dorms for that matter, and they were just deciding to. So they would begin building dorms and decided to use it as a test, building it on the entrance exam day, and would see if anyone would leave. They had to wait to find out the results, and if they were to leave, then they would get insta-rejected. So Izuku would sit there, no phones allowed, watching as the timer would slowly tick on down. They couldn't even talk to one another. They tested their intellect, tested their abilities. Now it was to test their mental strength. Izuku, bored, would sit there as more participants would funnel in from the last examination, from the last hero entrance exam. And so as they would funnel in, the timer would begin going up. Many students gasping, yelling out, "Oh, come on," they would say, confused, why was this happening? But, of course, they didn't care. And slowly but surely, the timer would trickle on down. Of course, a few students would have enough, standing up and leaving the auditorium, instantly getting declined. But Izuku wasn't one of them, sitting there, watching as the timer would tick down until it would finally reach 0. By then, it was already midnight, and that is when Present Mike would hand out the acceptance letters and the rejection letters, handing them out, giving them all to students. And of course, Izuku would be handed an acceptance letter. He tears it open eagerly, awaiting finding out what class he is in, and lo and behold, it said right at the very top, "Congratulations, Izuku, you have been accepted into class 1A. Izuku looks down towards it smiling, thinking back to all of the trials that he went through to get here, seeing and hearing his mother's death, and then getting basically kidnapped by someone that would raise him, raising him up, teaching him who he was and who he could be with the 10 Shadows technique. And now it was all worth it. He was well on his way to becoming a hero. As Izuku continued to read the letter through all the useless law drama and tech with an acceptance letter, eventually Izuku would find down at the very bottom of the page, it would say, "Class 1A meets outside to the left of the auditorium as soon as you get to this letter." Confused, Izuku stands up and sees a couple of others as well, and would begin walking over towards the left side of the auditorium after they exit. From there, they would actually see Aizawa, their future teacher, standing there waiting for them. And after all of the students would arrive there, he would smile looking towards them, a very rare occurrence, while at this point, the kids wouldn't really know that. "Good evening, my future class and students. Because of recent dangers and shortcomings within the Hero Society, UA has made the unfortunate decision to move all of you onto campus in dorms. I hope you all understand, as you will now be staying here from now on, and that includes tonight. I will guide you to them now." "Oh, what? Come on!" some of the kids would say, confused. Why do they have to stay here now, tonight of all times? They just want to go back and sleep in their own bed, especially after UA made them wait nearly 12 hours after they finished the entrance exam. But Aizawa didn't care, shaking them off. "It's a safety precaution. Trust me, you're a lot better off in here than you are out there," he would say, walking them towards the dormitories before he would drop them off in front. Many of the students sort of mad and angry about this. However, Izuku couldn't be happier. His person was right. They were right. He was going to have dorms on campus, and it was amazing. And so he would walk up there, walking up to his room, finding it, claiming it, and going right to bed. He was extremely tired after all. Upon the next day coming, as Izuku would wake up hearing birds chirping and the sun peering through his blinds, he would eagerly jump up out of bed, excited and ready for the next day of school. It was the first day of UA after all. For some unforeseen circumstances, they had decided to start the school year off right after the entrance exam, which really made no sense thinking about it, but they still did. And because of that, they were now walking in to the UA school building. Many of the people that were in the dorms already making friends, as they decided to stay in the common area and hang out for a little bit after being dropped off by Aizawa. And so we would see groups of Class 1A walking into the building, walking up and looking for their classroom. Izuku, however, due to going up and falling asleep almost instantly, wouldn't really have any friends to talk to just walking in. He was sure he would make friends later anyway. And so, as Izuku would walk in, he would sit down, finding out that the classroom was empty. Because of his eagerness, he had somehow neglected to find out that class doesn't start for another hour. And so, as he would stand there waiting, while all the rest of the students would slowly trickle in to the classroom. As Izuku would sit there, he would put his feet up onto the desk, resting his head in his hands, falling asleep, just completely dozing off, as he was still almost exhausted from the day before. And so, as all the rest of the students would walk in, they would look over, seeing Izuku asleep, and wouldn't really care. This is high school now. That's not really something you'd laugh at a student about, especially after waiting 12 hours to find out if you were accepted into a hero school or not. And so, as we would then see Aizawa wake up from his nap, sitting at the front of the classroom in his caterpillar sleeping bag. As he would wake up, he would look around, seeing all of the students outstretched before him before his eyes would land on Izuku. He would smirk to himself, thinking, nice, another exhausted student. He would say before telling them all that they had to head down to Lot A if they wanted to not be expelled, as if any of the students managed to be late or performed terribly on the soon-to-come quirk apprehension test, then they would be expelled. All of the students would look around, looking towards each other, almost a wave of competitiveness in the air now, and they weren't going to be the ones to fall asleep, and so, or not to fall asleep, to be expelled. And so they would all rush off, racing to put their PE uniforms on and to make it down to the testing site where they would be doing the quirk apprehension test. However, due to the hustle and bustle, Izuku still wouldn't have woken up. He's still asleep. And he is still in an empty classroom now, as we would cut to see the quirk apprehension test taking place. We would see Aizawa tossing a ball up to Bakugo as he would hold it, gripping it in his hand with a smirk on his face. He would twist his back, using his shoulders, propelling the ball forward, sending out a giant explosion into the ball, sending it 700 meters into the distance. Next up, we would see Uraraka grab hold of the ball and use her quirk to send it into the air, using her anti-gravity quirk, causing it to go infinity meters. However, we could cut back to see Izuku somehow jolt awake. Looking around, he would see his classroom still empty. And that's weird. I thought that kids had started coming in, he would say, looking around before looking up towards the classroom clock, seeing that it was now an hour past the time class was supposed to start. Shocked, Izuku jumps up, looking around, wondering if there's any place his class could have went, but he couldn't find any. He would race out of the building, summoning Nue, jumping on its back, as he would then fly around, looking for where his class could be until he would find them, finding them performing a race. Izuku would jump in, flying down, landing right by the starting line, yelling at Aizawa, "I hope I'm not late," he would say with a smirk on his face, as Aizawa would just shake his head. For some reason, he would decide to let Izuku's insolence and tardiness go, deciding not to expel him. And so as Izuku would land, Aizawa would instantly shoot the starting gun, yelling out "go," as everyone would begin racing past him. Izuku would summon divine dogs using his hand signals before they would appear out of his shadows. He would jump onto the black one as it would begin racing, using its long legs, propelling itself forward, racing past all of Izuku's classmates and crossing the finish line in first. From there, the next couple of tests would go by without a hitch. Izuku would do the strength test and pass it pretty well. Durability test as well, the same. And so that would mark the end of the quirk apprehension test, and it was now right around 11 a.m. or lunchtime. So Aizawa would smile towards them all before bidding them farewell, as it was now time for them to go eat lunch. They would race up into the UA building, looking for the cafeteria before finding it, and would race in, slamming through the doors, only to find all of the other classes had already started eating. They'd race towards the lunch line, trying to get any of the scraps that they had left behind, but none of them were there. No scraps were even remaining, maybe a few short strands of potato or french fry. And so with no lunch in their system, they would all look on exhausted and tired, and at the same time mad. Aizawa had held them there so long that they now didn't even have any food, and their first hero class was literally right after lunch, so they're not even going to have any energy to participate. This was ridiculous. Many of them thought to themselves before going and sitting down, asking a few others from, say, Class 1B or the second years if they could borrow some food. And so with that, a couple of 30 minutes would pass as the bell would then ring, signifying that the lunch period was ending. They would all rush out of the cafeteria before heading back to their classroom. They would walk in, all happy and excited, ready for the hero portion of the test. Or not hero portion, the hero class, their first hero class. And they really couldn't wait. However, some of them still were exhausted, eyes blinking in and out of consciousness, as they really hadn't used their quirk that much before, if not for the entrance exam literally the day prior, and they were already sore from that. UA was an endless cycle of strengthening and using your quirks. And so, as they would all sit down, we would hear loud footsteps stomping into the building, stomping into the classroom. The door would slide open, flying out of its hinges as it would splinter and crackle off. The giant wooden door seemed to be like some sort of children's toy to this person that now opened it. And lo and behold, it was the number one hero, the symbol of peace, All Might. He stood there with a giant smile on his face. "I am here," he would say in a loud, booming voice echoing across the classroom. With a smile, he would turn his head, looking around at all of his students. "Good evening, class," or should I say good afternoon. "Are you all ready for your first hero class ever?" He would say, a smile on his face, as many of the students, a sudden jolt of energy, seeing that the symbol of peace was their hero, would jump up into the air. Their teacher, they would fully put their arms into the air. "Yeah!" they would say in eager excitement. All Might would laugh for a moment before telling them to put their PE uniforms on and follow him. They would put them back on after Aizawa had told them to, and would then follow him into a city. This city would be where they would find out they were going to be taking the Heroes vs. Villains battle trial. As they would stand there, All Might would look around, glazing through the class with his eyes, looking for anyone he wanted to be on the first team to set an example. Izuku, you'll be on the Heroes. Who else? Why don't we go? Ida will be on the Heroes as well. So Izuku and Ida will be a team. And then let's go Kirishima and Bakugo. You two will be the villains for this test. I'm going to want you to walk into this building right here. You will have 5 minutes to hide a device. If the heroes capture you with this specialty tape, or they touch the device, you lose. If you manage to defeat the heroes, capturing them, or the timer runs out, you win. That is how the battle trials will go. Do I make myself clear, class? Yes, the class would say in unison, as he would then give Bakugo and Kirishima the go-ahead to go into the building and hide the device. Meanwhile, we would see Izuku and Ida standing outside the building, beginning to formulate a plan. Ida would begin asking Izuku what his quirk was, as he would say he can summon 10 different sort of beasts or things. He doesn't really exactly know how to put it in a language Ida would understand, but at the very least he was trying. So Ida would understand this and would realize that their best point of attack would probably be Izuku to distract either both Bakugo and Kirishima or one or the other, distracting them, and then Ida, using his engines, could run past both of them while they're fighting Izuku. Izuku would agree, knowing that this was going to be hopefully easy with his 10 shadows, and so All Might would then give both of them the sign that they could go in. As they would walk in the building creaking and shifting in the wind as Izuku and Ida would walk around nervously, waiting, hungry for a battle, especially Izuku, as Bakugo and Kirishima would both look towards each other and would begin walking down the hallway together. Of course, with Bakugo being paired with Kirishima, one of his only friends he'd managed to get due to Bakugo being so manly, the two of them had actually decided to formulate some type of plan, some sort of thing. And so, as we would see Izuku and Ida begin walking, so too would Bakugo and Kirishima, eventually the two teams crossing paths with one another. Izuku seeing this as Bakugo would smirk to himself, sending out explosions, barreling himself towards the two of them, as Izuku would then summon Rabbit Escape. Hundreds of rabbits swarming out of Izuku's shadow, scattering, covering the entire hallway. As both Bakugo and Kirishima would look on, completely confused, wondering what was going on. The hundreds of rabbits just all of a sudden appearing? This made no sense. They would think to themselves before Izuku and Ida would get away, flying away throughout the hallway as Ida would be using his engines and Izuku would grab hold of his back. The two of them flying through, using Ida's engines to make it to the other side of the building. With them now on the other side, Bakugo and Kirishima would finally have enough of all the rabbits as they would soon start to dissipate. Bakugo would angrily use his explosions, using them to fly through the halls until he would find the two of them. Izuku would yell for Ida to keep going forward, telling him that Bakugo will surely be here any minute and that he will be able to handle him. Ida would give a head nod in agreement before rushing off using his engines. As we would then cut to see Izuku standing in the hallway, waiting for Bakugo, as Bakugo would finally appear, using his explosions, tackling Izuku to the ground. He would stand over him, standing over Izuku, looking towards him as a small tear would fall out of Bakugo's eye. "What happened to you, Izuku? I thought you were dead. My entire family thought you were dead. What happened? Ever since my mom came to check on you guys, check on you after everything that had happened, and yet you were gone. Your mother was dead, and that man was dead on your floor. What happened?" Izuku would look up towards Bakugo, not really understanding. He wasn't expecting this level of emotion from Bakugo, as being a 4-year-old is an extremely pure state of someone's childhood, of someone's life. They don't have all these outside pressures and teachings pulling them down, pulling them towards a certain belief or mindset. And because of that, Bakugo at 4 years old was still friends with Izuku, even just a little bit. Even if he was quirkless, he still was friends with him. And because of that, because of his little turn when Izuku told everyone he was quirkless, he found it really hard to live with himself. His friend he had turned away from was now dead, but now he was alive 10 years later. It was all so confusing. And Bakugo really was just wanting to know what his childhood friend, what had happened to him. And so as Izuku would sit under the hothead, as the hothead would stand over him, sending out small sparks flying from his hands, his palms, as if telling him to tell him what was going on, as Izuku would just kind of shake his head, saying that, well, my mom was killed, and my dad came to rescue me. That's it, Izuku would say, as Bakugo would laugh. "Oh, please. Please, tell me the real story, he would say, not really choosing to believe it, but this is where Izuku would have enough. Finding a chance, he would use his hand signal, summoning divine dogs as they would come out of nowhere, grabbing hold of Bakugo's arms, both of them biting down towards his forearms as he would yell off in pain. The dog's fangs sinking deeper and deeper into his flesh. He would yell out, trying to pull his forearms up, sending off small explosions, but not managing to do enough to get the divine dogs off of him. Seeing this, Izuku would then jump up, summoning the great serpent as it would extend through the hallway, wrapping its long body around Bakugo, suffocating him and snaring him within it, squeezing him tightly before he would pass out. Izuku putting the capture tape around Bakugo's body. From there, we would see Kirishima running around the hallways looking for where Bakugo went before he would finally find Ida, finding him right in the end of the building, where we would then see the device. Kirishima would strengthen, hardening his forearms, racing towards Ida, trying to send a flying fist into Ida's gut. However, using his engines, he would propel his leg forward, slamming his calf right into the side of Kirishima's head, sending him flying into the wall beside them. He would harden his body, landing in it before peeling himself out of the rubble. Looking towards Ida, he would slam his fists together with a smirk. "Oh, this is gonna be fun," he would say out loud, an excited voice echoing and ringing out. But right as he says this, Izuku would summon the great serpent once again, as it would come barreling towards Kirishima, biting down right on his torso, flailing its mouth, sending him flying through the ceiling, sending a hole right through it. As he would fly into the air, he would begin cascading down towards the ground, but it was too late. Both Izuku and Ida would walk towards the device and would place their hand on it, signifying that it was over. They had won. All Might would come over the loudspeaker, congratulating both Izuku and Ida, telling them to walk back up to where the rest of their class was. Upon arriving back, All Might would greet them with a smile, patting the two of them on the back. "You see, class, that is a very, very good performance you all just saw. Izuku and Ida here performed very well, formulated a plan, and executed it. I hope all of you can manage to replicate their success. Well, at least half." "Alright, let's begin with the next team," he would say before calling them up, and the teams would then continue to go. From there, we would then cut forward a couple of weeks in advance. All of Class 1A had been using and training their quirks during their hero class as much as they could, while also learning from the rest of their teachers, training as much as they could. They would train over and over again for hours with All Might, as he would see that they would become the strongest and most full potential versions of themselves. However, before Izuku would walk into school this morning, he would be standing outside of the dorm building. We'd see him doing a summoning for a Shikigami, summoning the toad, as it would then stare towards him, flailing its tongue out at him, but he would dodge it. Izuku would smirk towards it before it would then kneel its head down, seeing Nue summoned right behind Izuku's back. It would lower its head down, signifying that it was yielding, as Izuku would then walk up to the toad, thinking to himself that this could be a very sort of useful, while also being funny tactic for when he inevitably has to fight another person, possibly capturing them within the toad's mouth. Izuku would smile for a moment before he would see his classmates beginning to walk in, mainly Bakugo and Kirishima. They would call him over, waving their hand as Izuku would smile, standing up, running over to them. Despite the loss both Bakugo and Kirishima had took in the Heroes vs. Villains, that didn't stop them from becoming good friends with Izuku, and especially with Bakugo wanting to make up the wrongs that he did in his past. He still doesn't quite understand why Izuku had told the class he was quirkless if he somehow awakened his quirk later in life, but, stuff happens, and he wasn't really going to worry about it now as his childhood friend was back and here to stay. And so as the three of them would walk in, we would see the bus waiting right outside the building for them. They would pile on as Aizawa would tick off their name box, signifying that they were in attendance. They would walk onto the bus, going to sit down, as we would see Aizawa stand up, walking up to the bus, yelling out that they were now about to go on their first field trip to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, a top-of-the-line training facility, and he wants everybody on their best behavior. Of course, the class would nod their heads, telling him that, of course, they were going to be on their best behavior. Why wouldn't they? They would think to themselves before he would nod his head, sitting down in the front seat before the bus would begin driving off. From here, we would see all of the students beginning to talk amongst themselves, asking each other what they think is the strongest person in the entire class, who they think is the strongest class, and what their quirk is, what they have as the strongest quirk. And lo and behold, a few people would begin talking about both Todoroki and Izuku, explaining how Izuku was able to summon these different sort of animals, beasts, and he was able to use them effectively. And not only that, the beasts had power, specifically many of them who had watched Izuku during the entrance exam speaking about Nue, and how he has these electric hardened wings, and how that creates him as a very, very powerful foe. They would begin talking amongst themselves, talking about Izuku's dogs or the great serpent, even the rabbits, all of those rabbits acting as sort of a cloud to let Izuku escape. It was really, really wonderful and strong to see all of this unfolding. And so they would begin talking about Izuku and then shift over to Todoroki, explaining how he has the half and half fire and half ice quirk, and how that also makes him extremely, extremely strong. And because of that, we would see sort of a split between the class, many unsure of who was the strongest, either Izuku or Todoroki. However, it would become painfully obvious here soon enough. As the bus would come to a steady halt, we would see all of the students walk in, piling into the building as the Hero 13 would be inside waiting for them. "Good morning, Class 1A, she would say, yelling out through her costume. "This is the Unforeseen Simulation Joint," she would say, proud, opening up, outstretching her arms, showing them all with a smirk on her face, though of course they couldn't see it. "This is where you all will be training for the next couple of hours, so make yourselves comfortable." But right as she finished that sentence, a purple warp gate portal would outstretch, opening up, cutting through the air like a knife. The atmosphere grew heavy before the portal would outstretch even more. Villain after villain beginning to pile out of it. With a smirk on many of their faces, they would stare up towards Class 1A, bloodlust seeping out of their gaze, out of their vision. Looking up towards them, they would smile, a greedy and dirty, villainous smile. "Well, well, well, if it isn't Class 1A, Shigaraki would say with his scratchy voice, a hand covering his face, hands all over his body, before the Nomu would finally walk out of the portal as well. Kurogiri finally closing his giant warp gate and appearing next to Shigaraki. "What do you want me to do, young master?" he would say towards Shigaraki as Shigaraki would smile. What to do. I know. Why don't you scatter all of Class 1A around the USJ? Make it so that, they have a hard time fighting against the hordes of villains we summoned. He would say, laughing, giving himself a little chuckle before Kirigiri would nod his warped head. Nodding his head, he would summon a portal underneath all of Class 1A, scattering them across the USJ, leaving just a few students right up at the top. However, we would see both 13 and Aizawa jump down, beginning to fight the massive horde of villains, fighting them one by one, trying to make it so they weren't going to be defeated and have their students, the people that they were entrusted with, the safety of their students, at harm. Now they didn't want any of them to die. We cut to see Izuku falling from the sky as he would begin summoning Nue. Nue would fly out of the air, catching Izuku, holding him up in the air as he would begin to look around, wondering where he should go and how he should go about helping his classmates, before he would spot Asui and Mineta on a boat, villains after villain climbing over the edge of it, peering towards them as Mineta would be squirming, almost as if he was peeing his pants. Izuku would point down, commanding Nue to take him down there as he would begin flying. He would let go of Izuku as Izuku would fall down to the ground, summoning divine dogs as well, as they would begin growling and barking towards the villains surrounding them. Asui would look towards Izuku, thanking him for coming down and helping them, as Izuku, of course, would say, no problem. From there, we would see Nue circling back around, using its electricity, slamming down into a villain, using its wings to electrocute them, before another would jump towards him, trying to grab hold of his wings, but would get electrocuted as well. From there, using it as a distraction, Izuku would cause Nue to disappear before his divine dogs would jump in, jumping down, biting onto each of the villain's arms, strangling their arms, all the circulation, the blood flowing out of it. From there, we would see Izuku go over, grabbing hold of Mineta, smacking him upside the head. Mineta, come on! You're in Class 1A for a reason. Just because some villains want to attack us, you have potential. You're in Class 1A and you weren't expelled. Think about that, Mineta. Think about it, he would say, staring towards Mineta as Mineta would begin nodding. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right about that. Okay, yeah, he would say, beginning to pop off the balls from the top of his head and throwing them at all of the villains climbing over the edge of the boat. Mineta would smile, seeing many of them getting stuck before Izuku's dogs would jump in, biting their arms and legs, trying to get them to pass out. From there, Izuku would look towards them, hearing a yell out in pain. He would look up to see Aizawa struggling as the Nomu would begin slamming its arms into Aizawa's stomach, slamming them at such velocity it seemed like shockwaves were being sent out behind Aizawa's back. Izuku, seeing this, would yell towards Asui and Mineta, telling them that he's gonna go help Aizawa and that they have it from here. Both Mineta and Asui would nod their heads, giving a signal of agreement before Izuku would summon Nue once again, grabbing hold of his wings, flying on the back of him, flying over, across the water, over to where Aizawa was waiting there, almost unconscious, as blood seeped from the top of his head, from his scalp, as he would look, fading in and out of consciousness, before finally he would see the back of Izuku standing right in front of him, protecting him from any further harm from the Nomu. Right as the Nomu was about to send another punch, Izuku would land down, stopping it from even happening, as the Nomu would recoil, unsure of if he should attack Izuku or not. He would look back towards his master of Shigaraki, looking towards him, asking for what his next move should be before Shigaraki would give a hand sign. "Kill him, Nomu. If he wants to get in your way, make sure it never happens again," you'd say, his scratchy voice trying to snarl out his words as the Nomu would give a screech in agreement, going down, trying to slam a punch into the side of Izuku's head, but he managed to dodge it. He would begin to summon his divine dogs once more as they would appear, jumping towards the Nomu, grabbing hold of its arms, biting, sinking their fangs into the Nomu's hard flesh. However, they would jump back, seeing the Nomu's wounds heal with ease, healing without any sort of problem. Izuku would stare on, shocked. He thought the Nomu had some sort of bird strength quirk, but now it has a regeneration quirk as well? This thing has multiple quirks? He would think out loud as Shigaraki would begin laughing, holding his arms outstretched. "Oh, this is just the tip of the iceberg, kid. We have hundreds of these things that rival the strength of All Might. The hero world, the hero society, it's over as you know it. The villains will rule once more. Just you wait," he would say, a smile on his face, as the Nomu instantly would jump over towards the white dog as it would grab hold of its neck, snapping the white dog's neck, killing it, as Izuku would stare on in a horror and in shock. He had never seen one of his Shikigami, one of his 10 shadows, killed before, and now he had just seen it. Almost like a bluish essence floating off of the dog's body. He would look towards it, confused, instantly retracting his other divine dog, not wanting anything bad to happen to it, as he would then summon Nue, hoping that Nue would be able to do something with it, using his electricity. Flying down, using its wings, it would slam them into the Nomu's back, electrocuting him as it would begin jolting, its body twitching, its veins and muscles popping out from the bone, using as the electricity would cause him to start twitching all around. Nue would fly back, landing right next to Izuku before the Nomu would jump, lurching towards him, the electricity barely even affecting him, slamming its fist right into Nue's wings. He had used them to protect Izuku, the wings used as a defensive shield, holding Izuku away from harm, away from the Nomu's punches, as each punch would be sent flying down towards Nue's wings. However, they weren't doing anything, Nue managing to protect Izuku, at least for the time being. As Izuku would stand there inside Nue's wings, he was thinking to himself, wondering what he could possibly do before he would hope that the great serpent would be able to do something about this Nomu. Summoning it, it would come jumping out of the shadows, jumping towards the Nomu, lurching open its body, its fangs outstretched, grabbing hold of the Nomu's head, holding it, its fangs biting down, injecting some sort of venom into its opponent, immobilizing the Nomu. As the Nomu stands there, completely overpowered, as the Nomu would begin wrapping its long, slimy body around it, stretching and ensnaring the Nomu, squeezing and suffocating it inside. However, because of the serpent grabbing hold of the Nomu's exposed brain, the Nomu couldn't do anything. There was no point for the Nomu anymore, its brain completely fried and destroyed by being bitten by the serpent. And so, as the Nomu would be suffocated, Shigaraki would start to twitch out, losing his mind. No, no, no! It can't be! He would yell out, looking towards Izuku in anger and in frustration. You, he would say, pointing towards Izuku, you did this. You killed him. I'm gonna get my revenge on you, he would say, jumping towards Izuku, rushing towards him, his hands outstretched, trying to decay him. However, Izuku wouldn't have it, summoning Divine Dog Totality. The white dog's power had fused with the black one, creating an even more improved version of the divine dog. It would jump towards Shigaraki, biting at its hand, biting towards it as Shigaraki's fingers would begin bleeding profusely. He would yell out in pain, yelling out, trying to pull his hand out of the dog's mouth, but it was no use, causing more harm than good. Because Shigaraki was trying to pull his hand out, his fingers would be snatched off, bitten off by the dog. Yelling out in pain, he would fall back, holding his hand with his other, seeing that 3 of his fingers had been destroyed, bitten off from his body. Seeing his master in danger, Kirigiri would jump into action, creating a portal underneath the 2 of them, sending them back to the League of Villains hideout. As Shigaraki would fall down, slamming into the hardwood floors of the bar, he would yell towards Kirigiri, "What are you doing? I had it taken care of." "That freak, he just destroyed my hand. I had to kill him. Why didn't you let me?" "Young sir, you did not have control of that situation. If I let you continue fighting him, it was almost sure that you would be killed." "If that's what you think, and think of me, I would have killed him," he would say, spitting through his teeth, words laced with malice towards Kirigiri. He wanted to get his revenge on Izuku. However, he would not have it for the time being. As Izuku would now stand there, looking down towards the bloody scene in front of him, seeing a few of the fingers coughed out of his dog's mouth, he would look back up towards the top of the USJ, right where the entrance was, as heroes would now jump in. Breaking through the doors, they would look around, seeing that many of the villains had already been defeated. They were a little too late to give the most amount of help they could. So from there, they would just go around searching and finding as many of Class 1A students as possible, bringing them back towards the center, where they would begin discussing their next steps. Where a bus would finally come, police would come, take their statements and whatnot, before they would then bustle them back off to the dorm buildings. This was a PR nightmare for UA. A attack on campus, mind you, where they moved all of the students in dorms because it was safer. This was even worse than it was in the original timeline. Everyone completely shocked and confused. The disgraced UA and Nezu having to make a statement that very same day about it, saying how that this was a completely confusing attack. However, the villains didn't know what kind of quirks the students had. They placed a girl with a frog quirk in the water section, and because of this, it seemed like an uncoordinated villain attack trying to do as much harm as possible. However, due to the innate strength and nature of Class 1A, no student was badly harmed. Nezu would begin twisting the story, using his intelligence to show just how strong UA was. These are first years, barely even a month into training, 15-year-olds having to face off against villains that had managed to get onto campus due to a portal quirk, and yet they held their own, defeating hundreds of villains in their path. If that doesn't show you how strong UA is as a school, I don't know what will. And as a final announcement, Nezu would say the UA entrance exam will be happening in 2 weeks' time to show the world how strong UA is if they don't believe it after the USJ incident. And so with this news, we would see all of Class 1A watching the press conference on the Common Area TV. They would hear about the sports festival from Nezu through the press conference, as many of them would jump up and down in excitement. This was a pivotal opportunity for them all. They were going to be able to use their quirks against each other in a sports festival to prove once and for all who the strongest first years were. This was an extremely exciting time in all of their lives, and they couldn't wait. However, Izuku would walk out of the dorm building. He was almost nervous. He wanted to summon another Shikigami and to capture it, to ensnare it, and allow him to use their abilities. And so he would summon Max Elephant, summoning it as this pinkish elephant would appear out of the ground. It would look towards Izuku, spewing out a large volume of water from its trunk towards him, as Izuku would dodge before it would begin racing towards him, using its tusks, trying to puncture Izuku before jumping towards him, trying to use its weight to crush him. But it wouldn't work. Izuku, summoning Nue, would fly up and over the elephant, landing on its back, summoning the snake as it would wrap its body around the elephant's head, causing the elephant to kneel down, giving Izuku the victory and yet another shadow in his arsenal. As Izuku would smile, looking towards the elephant, this was his final Shikigami he was going to use in the UA Sports Festival, and it was a good one at that. Although it took a lot of cursed energy to summon, it was still going to be proven useful. He just had to wait for the right scenario. And so we would cut forward a few short weeks where we would see all of Class 1A walking into the stadium, smiles outstretched over their faces as they would hold their hands up in triumph, waving them around, smiles on their faces. This was it, the UA Sports Festival. They would look around, looking at all of the bystanders, watching them eagerly in excitement. From here, we would see Midnight walk down, a whip in her hand, crackling it into the air, silencing the crowd. So, this is the UA Sports Festival. I hope all of you, competitors or bystanders, are excited. Of course, many of you already do know, but if you don't, the UA Sports Festival will be consisting of 3 events: an obstacle race, a cavalry battle, and finally, the event you all will be waiting for, the 1v1 tournament. I hope you all are ready for an amazing sports festival. And without any further ado, let's give it up for our competitors who have begun making their way towards the starting line for the obstacle course. She would say out, echoing using the mic as the crowd would erupt into cheers. We cut over, seeing all of the students waiting, standing in line right where the starting line was. Midnight would fire the starting gun as they would all begin to rush off, running through the dirt path, pushing each other forward, many using their quirks to fly ahead, including Momo and Bakugo flying ahead. Izuku, seeing Bakugo flying forward, using his explosions, he wouldn't want to be left behind, summoning Nue and jumping on its back as you'd begin flying forward. Nue would fly, using its speed, carrying Izuku around right over both the minefield and the giant ravine, where Izuku would then see the huge zero-pointer robot. He knew he wasn't going to be able to just defeat it on his own, so he would have Nue put him on the ground, summoning his divine dog totality before Nue would jumping towards the zero-pointer, using its wings, slamming them into the hard metal of the zero-pointer, sending out hundreds of volts of electricity right into the zero-pointer's head, causing it to malfunction and fall down to the ground, slamming it shut. Izuku now would hop on Divine Dog's back as it would begin running towards the finish line. We would cut to see Bakugo right behind Izuku, yelling out that he was catching up, but Izuku wouldn't let him, not even turning around to see Bakugo as the finish line was in arm's reach. Right as Izuku was about to cross, we would see Todoroki using his ice, propelling himself forward, outstretching his hand right towards the finish line, but it was too late. Izuku had crossed, giving himself the first place victory of the first event in the UA Sports Festival. Todoroki managing to pass in second, Bakugo in third, and the rest of the class slowly stumbling across the finish line after all three of them. With the first event now over, that means it is time for the cavalry battle. Izuku would look around, looking towards Bakugo and Kirishima as they would all nod their heads. The three friends would recruit at the same time Kaminari, where they would become an extremely formidable team. Izuku on top, due to having that 10 million points headband, would look around. He had held the most points even without the 10 million point headband. Because of Bakugo, Kirishima, and Kaminari, they would have the most points out of everyone already too. And so Izuku planned on using that 10 million point headband to goat people in. Their plan wasn't to be on the defensive because of the extremely offensive-esque quirks of Bakugo and Kaminari and even Izuku. They were going to go on the offensive. They were going to steal headbands despite having already most of the points in their possession. And so as the round would begin, everyone looking towards them, rushing towards them because of that 10 million point headband, Izuku would smile along with the rest of his team. This was all part of their plan. Summoning Divine Dog Totality, it would rush in, using its fangs, biting towards the heads of the top members of each of the cavalry teams. And naturally, they would go to dodge, dodging the bite from the dog. However, it wasn't aiming for their head, using its fang, its bottom fang, to put it right under the headband, grabbing it, biting it off of each team's head, and bringing it right back to Izuku. While they were also focused on getting the 10 million point headband, they hadn't realized that their own were being stolen by the very person they were trying to steal from. And so as Izuku put on headband after headband, people started to get discouraged. They were watching as this team was stealing everything. And because of that, many would just simply give up. They had 0 points going for Izuku's team, and their little points that they even did have were now stolen. And so they had to shift gears, shifting focus to fight other teams. And so as they would shift around looking for anyone else, the timer would go, blaring, signifying the end of the cavalry battle, with Izuku's team on top. The only teams managing to survive were Todoroki's and others that had managed to play it safe, not going for Izuku. And so with that, it is now time for the 1v1 tournament. Izuku would smile, walking up to the podium. He was the first member to go, facing off against Shinso, the 1 seed versus the last one. He would look towards Shinso with a smirk. Having never seen him before, Izuku was a little bit overconfident. Shinso was merely a member of Class 1C, not even a member of the hero classes. And so, to him, this should be a piece of cake. How Shinso had even managed to get this far was an anomaly. So, as Izuku would stand up in the arena, he would smile towards Shinso, looking towards him, as Shinso would then begin asking him questions. The match had just begun, and Shinso would start yelling out, trying to rage bait Izuku into a response. However, it wasn't working. Izuku wasn't an idiot. He would know that if Shinso was trying to talk to him, besides fighting him, talking to him, that had to be a reason for it. It had to be because of his quirk. And so Izuku wouldn't do anything. He would stand there silently before using his hand signal, summoning Rabbit Escape. Izuku wanted to make a point out of Shinso. If you weren't going to fight using your quirk, then you're going to get embarrassed. So hundreds of rabbits, a swarm of them, would begin rushing towards Shinso. He would look on in horror, seeing them all flooding towards him, as he could do nothing but watch. He would jump over and dodge a few of them, but there was too many. The sheer amount was too much for Shinso to handle, and he would be carried off by the rabbits off of the arena, where he would fall down to the grass below him, losing his 1v1 battle. The crowd would erupt in cheers. It was a funny but yet very, very spectacular victory for Izuku, displaying just another one of his abilities to all of them. From there, Izuku would walk back to the locker rooms, watching the rest of the first round fights unfold before it would finally be time for the second round. Izuku would be facing off against Shoto Todoroki, the member that they had said was the second strongest, if not the strongest, besides Izuku. And now this was Izuku's chance to prove to them all that he was truly the one and only strongest. So as Izuku would stand there, he would look over towards Todoroki, looking towards him, a smile on his face, as Todoroki would begin staring towards Izuku. The match would begin as he would send out a wave of ice barreling towards Izuku, but he wouldn't do anything. Summoning Nue, he would grab hold of him, flying up and over Todoroki, flying at the top of the arena. Todoroki would try to send a wave after wave of ice towards Izuku, but he was too strong. His ice wasn't going to do anything against him, and Izuku wanted to make this a point. All of this entire first year, the small portion of it at least, Todoroki hadn't used his fire, and Izuku wanted to show Todoroki that he was missing out on so much potential by not using it, and this was a very, very pivotal scenario for it. Todoroki couldn't do anything without his fire. His ice wouldn't be able to reach Izuku. And so, because of that, Izuku would continue standing there before Todoroki would have enough. He would send out a blaze, a tornado of fire, barreling towards Izuku and Nue, but Izuku wouldn't care. He would fly down, summoning Max Elephant, as the elephant would begin spraying Todoroki with large volumes of water from its trunk. Being distracted by all this water hitting him in the face, Izuku would summon Divine Dog Totality, racing forward as he would bite hold of his torso, shaking its mouth, ripping hold a chunk of flesh from his stomach. He would wince in pain, holding it as blood would begin seeping out of his PE uniform. Holding it in pain, he would begin breathing heavy. This was not at all how he thought the fight would go. He would look back towards Izuku, seeing another attack flying down as Nue would come, flying in towards him, slamming its head into Todoroki. Electricity scattered throughout his body. Because Max Elephant had sprayed him with all this water, he was soaking wet, and the electricity from Nue was now doing nothing to help it, actually using it as a conductor, causing the electricity to spread throughout Todoroki's body even faster, frying him as all of his hair would stand up on its end. He would fall down to the ground, completely passed out. From there, we cut forward, seeing Izuku now facing off against Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo would smile towards him, an eager smile outstretched across his face. This was it. This was the final battle. Childhood friends facing off against one another. The match would begin as Bakugo would send out his explosions, shooting them out from the palm of his hand, a smile outstretched across his face. He would reach his hand out towards Bakugo, reaching it out, trying to grab hold of him, but it wouldn't work. Bakugo, sending out his explosions, would slam one right into Izuku's stomach, causing blood to pool out of his mouth. He would spit out a large glob of blood from it before wiping the blood away. Summoning the great serpent, it would jump, lurching its mouth towards Bakugo's body, trying to grab hold of it, but he would use the explosions to send his body to the side, dodging Izuku's attack. It wasn't working. Izuku now struggling to find any means to hit Bakugo, as he was using his explosions to not only dodge, but to get up close to Izuku. Bakugo would come in, barreling in for another attack, sending an explosion Izuku's way, to which he would barely manage to dodge it, summoning Divine Dog Totality to stand behind him. This was his move. Bakugo would come in, jumping, lurching his body towards him, sending himself flailing out, arm outstretched, trying to send an explosion into him. But Izuku would duck down at the last second, his Divine Dog jumping over his ducked down body, reaching out its mouth, grabbing hold of Bakugo's hand. He would try to send an explosion, but the fangs were too strong, ripping hold of Bakugo's palm. He would yell out in pain, holding his hand, much like Shigaraki had done, as Izuku would then summon the toad. Its long, sticky tongue outstretching, capturing Bakugo like he was some sort of fly, grabbing hold of him, outstretching it, pulling him into his mouth, holding him there, using its sticky saliva to hold Bakugo down, capturing him with ease. As Izuku stood there, Bakugo now completely ensnared by the toad. 5 seconds would begin passing before midnight would sound the bell. It was over. This was it. The match was complete, and Izuku Midoriya had won. But right as he had done so, the sky would grow cold. A large purple portal would outstretch over everyone there. Nomu after Nomu would begin falling out of the portal. The crowd would scream in afraid and scared. They were terrified. They didn't know what to do. They'd begin funneling towards the exits as Endeavor would jump forward, sending his fire out, using his cork to begin fighting the Nomus. Nomu after Nomu, an army of them falling from out of the portal, as we would see Shigaraki fall out of it as well, landing down towards the ground with a smile, his hand wrapped up and covered. Ah, if it isn't my favorite student, Izuku. Oh, I knew your name now, buddy. After what you did to me at the USJ, you think I was just gonna let that pass? Just let it go? Oh, no, no, no. I couldn't. This is where it ends for you, he would say, yelling towards him as Izuku would laugh. "Oh, please, don't kid yourself. It's over for you." But it wasn't. Onomu would come in, slamming its fist into the distracted Izuku, sending him flying backwards, slamming back into the edge of the UA Coliseum. Izuku would slump down, his body exhausted as blood would fall down from his scalp. He would look up with shaky vision, seeing the blue-tufted boy walking towards him with a dark, dry skin. As he would look towards him, his pale body, a smile outstretched, the skin flakes would peel off of his face, looking towards Izuku. "I've been waiting for this," he would say, reaching out his hand towards Izuku, but it wasn't ever going to reach. Bakugo would appear, sending an explosion right into Shigaraki's back, causing him to be sent flying behind. The explosion would burn and singe deep into Shigaraki's body. He would yell out in pain, wincing from the burn as he would feel it even more in his gut. "Ugh, you UA brats disgust me," he would say, yelling out towards them all. He couldn't have it. He hated every second that these UA freaks were dominating him in battle. Finally, he would call over a horde of Nomus as they would begin rushing towards both Izuku and Bakugo, rushing in, but right as they did, All Might would appear, landing down towards the ground. He would look up, looking towards them with a frown on his face. "It's over, Shigaraki," he would say, slamming the top of his fist right down into the top of the Nomu. Seeing this, Shigaraki would recoil, but before coming back with a smile. "All Might, finally. You're the only person I hate more in this world than your little friend Izuku over there. And now I'm gonna get to kill you both? Oh, this is wonderful. I can't wait," he would say, as he would jump forward, jumping, using his body, twisting it around, slamming his hand into All Might, decaying part of All Might's stomach before he would jump back, sending a punch right in to Shigaraki's body. As Shigaraki would be sent flying back from this punch, Bakugo would jump in, his legs working on his own, slamming an explosion into the side of Shigaraki's face. And right as he does so, a portal would appear, sending him flying back into the League of Villains hideout. The Nomus had been defeated, with All Might and Endeavor there, along with the magnitude of other heroes. The Nomus stood no chance. It was a great stunt, showing the world that UA wasn't safe after all, even after the other villain attack, but still, they handled the Nomus with ease. And so, as Bakugo would stand there, we would see Izuku in and out of consciousness before All Might would walk up to him, patting him on the back, thanking him for saving him. Before All Might would make his decision, he had been watching Class 1A for many weeks, being their hero teacher, looking for One for All's successor. And he had finally found it. Bakugo Katsuki. He had considered both Todoroki and Izuku for such things. However, he saw that Izuku relied so much on his 10 shadows, and he saw Todoroki's arrogance to not use his dad's fire, and he decided that Bakugo, while yes, being slightly arrogant and overconfident, he had such a willingness to win, trying everything he could. He might not have been the most powerful like Izuku was, but that didn't matter. That willingness was exactly the willingness he needed to show All for One up, to finally defeat All for One. And so he would look towards Bakugo, telling him that he wanted Bakugo to be his successor. Bakugo would look up, looking towards All Might with a confused look on his face. What do you mean, successor? All Might, he would say, sort of confused, before All Might would laugh. Well, my quirk one for all. You can pass it down, and he would then go into the discussion talking about how All for One was there, and One for All was the opposite, and how One for All was created to destroy All for One and is pure evil. Izuku, barely conscious, would overhear all of it, realizing that Bakugo was All Might's successor. He'd be slightly jealous for Bakugo, but at the same time, he smiled. Bakugo deserved it. He had worked hard, even if he was slightly a bully or even if he was arrogant. Bakugo deserved it. He worked harder than most people ever would. And so All Might would pluck a hair strand from him, telling him that it will take 30 minutes before he will begin to feel anything, and that he is now the successor of One for All. We cut back to see all of the students in the dorm rooms. Izuku sitting there talking amongst everyone in the common area. Many of the students congratulating Izuku for his win during the UA Sports Festival. However, he did not care. He would thank them before walking up to Bakugo's room, knocking on the door. Bakugo would open it, seeing that it was Izuku, would welcome him inside before Izuku would sit down. So, you're All Might's successor, huh? He would say as Bakugo would look confused. Wait, that was supposed to be a secret. How do you know? Well, I overheard. I just want to say congratulations. I think you're going to be a good fit for it, huh? He'd say, laughing to himself, patting Bakugo on the back before outstretching his hand to shake Bakugo's. Bakugo would stand up, shaking Izuku as well, before the two of them would give each other a nod in camaraderie before Izuku would walk out of the room to go to bed. From there, we cut over to see Shigaraki standing before All for One, the two of them planning something huge. This is war, I tell you, Master. 2 times now they have embarrassed me, and you've let it slide, and I'm not gonna have a third one. We need even more Nomus and even more villains. This is a war, and it's time we show those UA brats who the League of Villains are. I guess you're right, Shigaraki. Alright. We'll use Aoyama to tell us UA's plan. And then we'll find out, and hopefully we'll come in and blindside them at the UA campus. Hit them where it hurts, right where they would least expect it. Sure, we've attacked them at the USJ and the Sports Festival Coliseum, but those are both far, far on the edges of campus. If we attack the main building, oh, it's over. They wouldn't be expecting it at all. He would say, a smirk on his face, before we would see all of the students pile in to their classroom. The day had just begun, but Aizawa had different plans. He would look towards all of his students, looking towards them before telling them what was going on. Due to the recent villain attacks, they are postponing both the internship and final exams to a later date. They instead are going to be going to an off-site location to train their quirks to the best of their abilities. They would ask why were they going to do this, but Aizawa would once again reassure them that this was the decision UA was making. They're going to a forest training camp to train with many pro hero group known as the Wild Kitty Cats. We're going to push Class 1A beyond their limits. And so the bus would arrive, pulling them off, and they would then begin the long trek into the mountains to begin their training. All the while, the League of Villains was preparing a war. Aoyama would tell them how they were going to an off-site location and when they were going to be returning. and this is the exact date all for one would choose: their return. If they return right then after a training week, surely they would be completely exhausted and they would be able to take them all out with ease. Shigaraki would agree as we cut back to see all of Class 1A, the bus pulling to a stop, as we would see Izuku beginning to look around. "This isn't the forest training camp, is it?" he would say, walking off the bus where the wild kitty cats would greet them. "Huh! Oh, please. This is nowhere close to the training camp. You guys actually have to find the training camp while fighting different sort of amalgamations. Good luck," they would say, hopping on the back of the bus before it would speed off. Class 1A, confused and shocked. "Wait, what?" they would say. Yup. This was it. This was the training exercises that they were going to be dealing with. And it was going to be brutal. From there, they would spend 6 hours searching for the training camp. Izuku, however, would not. He would summon Nue, grabbing hold of him, flying on his back, where he would then manage to reach the training camp within 30 minutes. Landing down, he would look at the surrounding area before flying back up. He would try and guide all of his classmates using Nue, but it wasn't really working. They couldn't hear him too well. He'd fly back down, but many of them had already gotten lost. Izuku would guide a group mainly consisting of Bakugo, Kirishima, Uraraka, Mina, and a few others back to the training camp. However, guys like Mineta, Kaminari, they had all gotten lost off on some other direction, and Izuku surely wasn't going to spend his time wasting away trying to find them, while a hearty feast of dinner was waiting for them all at the training camp. And so with that, they would eat dinner, going off to the hot springs to relax before their week full of training would begin. All of them brutal training, trying to strengthen their quirks. Izuku would use as much cursed energy as he could to summon as many of his Shikigami as he could, even fighting round deer and piercing ox, trying to submit them and add them to his arsenal, and eventually he would, gathering the two of them, although he still wasn't exactly as comfortable with them due to having just gotten them and using all of his other Shikigami way more. However, there was one Shikigami he had not wanted to summon the entire time: Maharaga, the divine general, 8-handled sword. He didn't want to summon him because he had been told how strong Maharaga is with his adaptation, but at the same time, he had understood that no one in the Fushiguro clan had managed to submit him, had managed to unlock this ability, or no one in the Zenin family had managed to force him to submit, and because of that, Izuku was scared. He didn't know if he would be able to do it, and so he, quite frankly, would just put it off, pushing it off as sort of a last-ditch effort if he was ever about to die or lose. And so from there, the training would continue for the next week, all of them training their quirks as hard as they could, training until it would finally end. And they would all grab onto the bus and would head back off to UA. Bakugo, having just received One for All, and now having a week of hard training to use it, was getting the hang of it, unlocking Black Whip extremely quickly, and even being able to use Full Cowling and using One for All very, very well, despite only having it for a couple of days. However, as the bus would pull in to UA, Clouds would begin appearing. Rain would slam down onto the ground, many of the students feeling something in their gut. Something was off, they would think. All Might, standing there, waiting for them, greeting all of the students, would feel it as well. And lo and behold, portal after portal would begin appearing. Not only was Kurogiri doing it, but also All for One. Villain after villain appearing out of the portals, along with Nomu after Nomu. Hundreds of villains spewing out of the portals along with Nomus. The alarms would begin sounding, alerting everyone on campus that a villain attack was happening, and a giant one at that. Nezu would race to his emergency phone, calling as many of the hero agencies as he could, demanding that they get to UA's campus right now. This was it. This was the final battle, the final war, and it could be gruesome. Right as this was unfolding, Shigaraki would appear, smiling along with All for One at his side. All Might would stare up towards him, shocked. What is the meaning of this, All for One? Do you really think you can manage to defeat me and my successor so easily now? He would say, a demanding, cold voice piercing through the air, as All for One would laugh. Don't kid yourself, All Might. This is the final battle, and this is where you and your successor die. One for All ends with you and him. Right as he would say that, Nomus and villains alike would begin rushing forward, along with many of the heroes. Heroes that had managed to arrive along with Class 1A would rush forward, beginning to fight in an all-out brawl. Many students that were on UA's campus would begin fighting as well, most notably the third years like Nejire and Mirio, all fighting, trying to defeat the large amounts of villains. Mirio would use his quirk, slipping through the ground, going up and punching a large amount of villains with ease before jumping off, looking for even more. This would continue over and over again. They would try and fight as many as they could. Nomus rushing in, slamming their fists into heroes, killing some and badly injuring others. This was it. High-end Nomus and hundreds of villains fighting it all out, battling for who would rule the country. Right as we hear this, Izuku and Bakugo would jump forward. Izuku using Divine Dog Totality to ride forward, jumping back as the dog's mouth would ensnare around one of the Nomu's necks, snapping it, before Bakugo would use One for All, full cowling, slamming a 45% punch right into a Nomu's gut. The two of them would look towards Shigaraki as All for One would begin fighting in hand-to-hand combat against All Might. All Might fighting and fighting as he can, slamming punch for punch into him, each and every blow sending shockwaves back behind each person. This was the final battle. Bakugo would race in, grabbing hold of Shigaraki, slamming him to the ground, as Shigaraki would smile. His fingers were back. All for One had blessed him with a couple of new quirks. Not only was he now with a decay quirk, but he has a regeneration quirk and a shock absorption quirk. He had turned into almost like a Nomu himself. Shigaraki would laugh, looking towards Bakugo. Bakugo would send an explosion right into Shigaraki's gut, but it wouldn't do anything. Shigaraki laughing towards him. I told you, it's over. Just you wait, I'll kill you and then I'll come for your little friend Izuku over there. Right as he says this, Izuku would summon Toad, the long tongue outstretching, grabbing hold of Shigaraki's grabbing hold of Shigaraki, using its tongue, but this wouldn't do anything. Shigaraki would grab hold of the toad's tongue, using all 5 fingers, decaying it. As the decay would outstretch around it, the toad's skin peeling off before it would turn into dust, now dead. The powers of the toad would spread throughout the rest of Izuku's Shikigami, but it was too late. The toad was gone, and he could not use it again. Losing now another one of his Shikigami, Izuku was mad. He would use Nue, flying in, using the electricity to electrocute Shigaraki, but the shock absorption was too much. Shigaraki seemed almost unbeatable now. We cut back to see All Might struggling mightily. All these circuits and red electricity flying off of All For One's body as he was beginning to push All Might back. Each and every punch causing All Might to be sent further and further back, struggling as smoke would begin emitting off of his body. He'd begin using 100% full power, yelling out plus ultra. And right as he does this, so will Bakugo. Bakugo using the cork, using One For All to race towards Shigaraki, inspired by All Might's pledge to win, by All Might's willingness to do anything he can. He would jump forward, grabbing hold of Shigaraki, trying to pull him down to the ground, sending an explosion into his gut, but it doesn't do anything. He would begin slamming punch after punch as these punches would begin overloading the shock absorption of Shigaraki, as each punch would be send Shigaraki back further and further. However, something would happen that cut through the air like a knife. A punch, a fist right through a gut. Izuku and Bakugo would look, turning towards to find All Might dead. The fist from All For One had pierced All Might's weak spot and had killed him instantly. All Might's body would slump to the floor, smoke spewing off of it as his bony form would now appear. The world shocked, news helicopters zooming in on the body of All Might laid there as All For One would laugh. "I told you, All Might," he would speak down towards the body. "You were never going to win this fight. And that goes for your successor too." Bakugo, confused, having been distracted, a hand would wrap around his neck, decaying the neck, causing Bakugo's body to decay. One For All, now no more. Bakugo's body slumping to the floor, turning to dust. He was dead. Izuku, watching this all, would be in shock. No! He would yell out in pain, in agony. He had watched his favorite hero since when he was a kid die right in front of him, and now he just watched one of his best friends die as well. Bakugo Katsuki, the successor of One For All, was no more. And with One For All now gone, we would see All For One laugh. "One For All is no more. The reign of villainy is among us," he would say, before Izuku would know. A shaky smile would appear on his face. Izuku would breathe. "With this treasure, I summon Maharaga," he would say, stuttering just a little bit as Maharaga would be summoned. The famous adaptability Shikigami, the shadow appearing as he would jump out, being sent flying, screeching towards Shigaraki, sending out punches its way. Shigaraki wouldn't do anything about it, the punches being easily absorbed before you'd grab hold of Maharaga's skin, decaying it. However, using reversed cursed technique, he would easily repair his arm. He would look towards Shigaraki again, having now realized what his thing was. He can absorb shocks and he has decay. He would jump towards him again, dodging each one of Shigaraki's very blatant hands, trying to decay him. And finally, he would grab hold of Shigaraki, snapping his neck, realizing that shock absorption had no effect up there. Shigaraki's body would fall down to the floor, dead, before All For One would look towards him. "I see you've managed to kill my successor," he would say in his deep voice, before Mahoraga would turn once again, turning towards All For One, as he was the closest. Izuku using it as a last-ditch effort. Somehow, some reason, Mahoraga hadn't managed to come and fight him yet. His whole plan was working, as it would be racing towards him, racing towards All For One, racing in as he would come, jumping towards him, as All For One would send out his staticky electricity barreling towards him, the red electricity trying to electrocute him, but he would dodge it. Nothing was getting in his way, slamming a fist into All For One's stomach, causing him to fall down to the ground, the fist hitting him with so much energy and cursed energy right through him. And right as he did so, the punches would come flying in, flying towards All For One's body, each hit sending shockwaves back, before he would slam a punch into All For One's respirator, effectively leaving him for dead. With that, Mahoraga was now looking for its next victim. He would turn his head, looking on, finding Izuku standing there, and he would know. This was it. No member of the Zenin clan had managed to tame, to submit Mahoraga. And could he somehow be the difference? Could he be the one to do it? He would think to himself as Mahoraga would jump in, sending out punch after punch towards Izuku, trying to survive as long as he could. He would dodge many of the punches, but some would end up connecting. He would summon Nue, grabbing hold of it as electricity would be sent flying off of him, using it, sending out electricity right into Mahoraga, trying to electrocute him. However, he would just adapt, easily able to. Next, he would summon Divine Dog's Totality, lurching their body towards Mahoraga, biting its arms. However, he would adapt once more. Izuku was trying anything he could, trying to become unadaptable, before he would finally do what he had hoped would work. He summoned as many of his shadows as he could, as many Shikagamis as he could. He would summon Divine Dog Totality again. He'd summon Nue, Great Serpent, Max Elephant, and even Rabbit Escape, hoping that all of these Shikigami at once would work. However, he wouldn't really be able to realize it if it would. Using so much cursed energy would cause him to fall down to the ground, commanding all of his shadows to try and submit Mahoraga. They'd go into an all-out battle, Mahoraga trying to balance against all of the rabbits flooding around, just distracting the battlefield. The elephant spraying him with water, the serpent biting hold, trying to ensnare its body, Nue using its electricity, along with Divine Dog Totality biting it. And this strategy would work. Mahoraga, having so many things to adapt to at once, wouldn't be able to in time. He would fall down to the ground, submitting to Izuku, submitting Izuku's legacy as he had managed to submit Mahoraga. Izuku would smile, shocked and completely confused at how he had managed to do it, standing up, a sudden burst of energy. There's no way, he'd think to himself. I did it. I submitted Mahoraga, he would say before looking around, seeing Nomu's fighting more villains, or Nomu's fighting more of his hero friends. He would then tell Maharaga to fight them and take care of them, which, of course, he would, with ease. From there, we cut forward 10 years in the future. Izuku is the #1 hero, but that doesn't matter right now. Izuku stares up towards 2 bronze statues as he reads the plaque. Here lies the heroes that lost their lives into the UA War. Most especially those who gave their lives fighting the ultimate villain, Bakugo Katsuki at All Might. As Izuku would read this, he'd place a small flower right in front, looking up to the statue of both Bakugo and All Might, smiling, a small tear fading from his eye. "I did it, Bakugo," he would say to it. "I became the #1 hero." It's funny, I always thought I'd be competing with you for it. In a way, I guess I am. Trying to live up to your sacrifice. Thank you, you'd say, turning his back, submitting himself as the #1 hero, using the 10 shadows, using the submitted Maharaga, while also remembering his fallen friend. And that is where What If Deku had the 10 shadows comes to an end. I hope you all did enjoy this What If. I know it's probably, if not my longest What If, one of them. I hope you all did enjoy it. It was quite fun to record. I mean, I haven't really done a sort of powers where they have all of these different things to summon before, so yeah, I thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and most importantly, comment your What If suggestions down in the comments section below. I will be replying to as many as I can. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.